Our next session, Scale, Climate Week Action Dialogue. Please welcome to the stage Managing Director for Climate Solutions and Networks, C40, Cassie Sutherland.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here this morning for this very exciting session, the Scale session, which I'll explain a little bit more about. And so just to introduce myself, my name is Cassie Sutherland, and I'm the Managing Director for Climate Solutions and Networks at C40 Cities, a network of nearly 100 of the world's largest cities who all come together to collaborate on ambitious climate action. And I'm delighted to welcome you here today to the Subnational Climate Leaders Exchange Action Dialogue. So it's a long name, but there's some great stuff in there. We've got the work of subnationals coming together. They're the leaders of the subnationals, and they're leaders on climate, and they're coming together to be able to exchange ideas, resources, solutions to really be able to accelerate ambitious climate action around the world. And over the past decade, we know that subnational governments have been critical to the global fight against the climate crisis. We've seen local leaders working hard to advance bold, on-the-ground solutions and making their voices heard at key moments. Some of those key moments including advocating for the historic Paris Agreement at COP21 in 2015, to also the launch of the SCALE programme at COP27 in 2022, really designed to elevate, equip, and empower subnational champions to work together to speed up action. We also saw subnational leaders come together in active participation at the local Climate Action Summit at COP28 in Dubai, where over 70 national governments recognized the importance of bringing in subnational leaders into their work on climate and agreed to enhance collaboration with those subnational leaders. So what is so exciting about the moment we're in is it's a real historic moment of this bringing together of different levels of government. And just last year, we saw that SCALE celebrated its first-year achievement with the launch of a major initiative, the Lowering Organic Waste Methane Initiative. As many of you will know, methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas and one of the fastest ways to slow global warming due to its short but intense warming impact. We know that methane really comes from the breakdown of food and organic matter, and the waste sector is an area that many cities, large cities around the world, but also smaller cities, have real direct control and impact over. So tackling waste-related methane emissions is not only within the power of cities, but also has benefits that reach many parts of the communities and populations in our cities, including reducing food waste, improving air quality through reduced ozone, supporting informal waste workers, creating good green jobs, and much, much more. So we saw that great achievement of the low methane program through the SCALE initiative, and today we're super excited that SCALE will be presenting its next sectoral focus, which I can't give away to you. Luckily, we have another speaker who's going to reveal the big reveal later on. So just before I turn over to esteemed speakers and a great panel that you're going to hear from this morning, I really want to thank SCALE's co-funders, the US State Department and Bloomberg Philanthropies for their generous support of the SCALE initiative and for their commitment to really advance this multi-level partnerships in the climate space, which are so vital for our future. I also want to recognize the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action for co-hosting this event. Very important, and it's fantastic to be in this wonderful space with you all. For us at C40 Cities, we're super proud to be an implementing partner in this effort, together with the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland, the Under 2 Coalition and their secretariat, the Climate Group, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and the WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. So, enough of me talking, enough of me enthusing you about the SCALE initiative and the rest of today's session. Let's hand over and get to our speakers. And I'm really honored to begin our program and to introduce Ambassador Nina Hachagian, US Special Representative for City and State Diplomacy at the US State Department.
Cassie, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. C40 has been an incredible partner on subnational climate policy and action, and so have the other network organizations contributing to this event, the World Resources Institute and the Climate Group. And Antha, thank you, and Bloomberg Philanthropies always for your support in boosting the representation and action of local leaders like you did in spectacular fashion at COP28 and countless other times, large and small. Without the mobilization of all these networks, it is hard to imagine subnational climate action being anywhere near as robust as it is today. I'm delighted to be a part of this event, and thanks to my team who helped organize alongside colleagues from the Office of the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change. Most of all, my gratitude goes to our distinguished participants and speakers, Vice Minister Matsuzawa, who will be providing closing remarks and who I had a chance to speak with earlier today, and Director General Goke, who is going to speak shortly after me. Your partnership is invaluable. So I'm the Special Representative for City and State Diplomacy at the U.S. State Department. My team and I work to elevate the voice, the vision, and the role of local leaders in U.S. diplomacy. We strive to promote and amplify best practice sharing between local leaders from across the globe, which is particularly critical in the climate and environment space. And events like these provide an opportunity to generate and exchange new knowledge and keep propelling our climate action forward. Given how very informed all of you are about subnational climate policy, I appreciate that I do not have to talk at length, like I sometimes do, about why local leaders matter so much, and the authorities that local leaders have are so critical in areas such as public transportation, renewable energy generation, building efficiency standards, and waste management, all of which are crucial to achieving our climate goals. Cities and states daily face the effects of a climate crisis and remain integral to devising innovative solutions. So I think we should take a moment to applaud the great work cities, counties, states, and communities are already doing. Difficult technical work, community consensus building, taking risks, and setting goals. So hats off to all of you doing it. Multi-level action is a beautiful thing when it is working well. The Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, is the most extensive climate legislation in our country's history. In these 2 years since the IRA was signed into law, over $265 billion in clean energy investments have been announced, creating over 300,000 new clean jobs in counties, cities, and states across the United States. This national level, supercharging other layers of governance as the IRA does, is a productive model, and our European and Japanese friends, among others, have also skillfully used this model. I'm also glad that we now have a global initiative to underscore the importance of multi-level partnerships. In the Coalition for High Ambition Multilevel Partnerships initiatives, or CHAMP as you know it, the United States supported CHAMP at COP28, and we now have over 70 signatories. Key groups in the United States have embraced CHAMP, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors officially has endorsed it. At the State Department, we have several programs that emphasize the importance of multi-level partnerships for climate action. I don't have time to highlight them all, but I'll give you a couple of examples. So a number of teams at the State Department collaborate on a peer-to-peer learning initiative between the United States and Latin American, Caribbean cities called Cities Forward. Cities Forward has matched cities in Latin America and Caribbean with cities in the United States to support mutual learning and develop sustainability action plans. These plans are city-led, they're inclusive, and they aim to make vulnerable, underserved communities more resilient to the impacts of climate change. In the coming months, we'll be releasing a Green Cities Finance Guide to help Latin American cities' efforts to find financing for their sustainability projects. And of course, there's SCALE, the Subnational Climate Action Leaders Exchange, which we are here today to celebrate and expand. SCALE has two primary tracks. One is a forum for dialogues and knowledge sharing, and a second track is called Accelerators, which focus on scaling up solutions through sharing lessons learned. Today we'll see both of these tracks in motion. With that, I'm going to conclude so that you can begin your productive exchanges. Let me again offer my thanks and gratitude for everyone who has committed their time to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be in New York and participate in a great number of very important discussions how to tackle climate change. I'd like to thank our co-host, the US State Department and its partners for organizing this important event. Last week, ladies and gentlemen, we could once again witness how cities are already dealing with climate impacts now because they were forced to deal with them, and that climate change is not an abstract future risk. Extreme rainfall led to heavy floods in Central Europe. People lost their homes and lives. Many cities, among them Vienna in Austria or Dresden in Germany, had to manage an extreme and rapid rise in water levels. Researchers show that the intensity of these floodings can clearly be attributed to climate change. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, 80% of all cities worldwide have already experienced the impacts of climate change, be it through floods, extreme heat, drought, or storms. At the same time, cities are also drivers of climate change. Due to the concentration of people, infrastructure, and economic activity, over 70% of the world's CO2 emissions are generated in cities. But many cities are already acting to address this, and some are impressive frontrunners. For example, in Europe, 100 cities, including Aarhus in Denmark or Sofia in Bulgaria, want to become climate neutral already in 2030. That is 20 years earlier than the EU's climate neutrality target 2050. Yet cities cannot fight the battle alone. While they have the necessary authority to reduce emissions in some sectors, in other areas they depend on collaboration with state and national governments. That's why multi-level climate action is crucial. Discussions later at this event will focus on two sectors where cities have significant abatement potential: waste and buildings. In 2022, the buildings and construction sector accounted for 37% of energy and process-related CO2 emissions. Given that the IEA projects global building floor area to grow by 70% in the next 30 years, with most of that growth occurring in the global south, it is clear that there is an urgent need to construct future buildings sustainable from the onset. We are proud to support several initiatives that address these challenges. For example, together with France, Germany initiated the Partnership for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, shortly PEEP. PEEP works with more than 10 partner countries. It combines technical advice, for example, on standards and policies, with financing solutions or large building projects such as hospitals or schools. We are also a strong supporter for the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, which is the leading global platform bringing together key actors around a shared vision of a zero-emission, efficient, and resilient buildings and construction sector. And with regard to waste, the second potential for cities, this sector is responsible for 20% of total methane emissions, and cities produce half of the world's waste. Against this background, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Scale's Low Methane Initiative, which aims to reduce 1 million tons of methane emissions each year. I look forward to hear more about the progress of this ambitious initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for implementation and upscaling. So let's cooperate to reduce emissions and make all cities resilient to the effects of climate change. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm Antha Williams, and I lead the Environment and Climate programs at Bloomberg Philanthropies, which includes all of Mike Bloomberg's personal efforts as well as his philanthropic giving on climate. And I think it's probably no surprise to anyone here, given Mike Bloomberg's 3 terms as mayor of New York City, that elevating the role of mayors and local leaders is really core to what we do at Bloomberg. So we've also seen that local climate action is really central to fulfilling the goals of the Paris Agreement and where we need to get on climate. Back in 2016, Mike and then Secretary Kerry saw that mayors were doing what the United Nations was urging national governments to do. They were lowering emissions and growing their populations and economies at the exact same time. They were setting science-based targets, they were implementing strong policies and programs, and mayors and governors could be really powerful allies to countries and national governments in terms of what they needed to do to get the job done on climate. And so for this reason, Bloomberg Philanthropies and the US State Department partnered then on what was a precursor to scale, known as Our Cities, Our Climate, and we invited 20 international cities to come to an exchange program in cities across the US and really exchange best practices on everything from bus rapid transit to reducing methane waste from landfills. And since that time, that network has continued to sow seeds, and we continue to work with those cities and mayors and their teams. But it's really been, I think, remarkable to see the growth in the field since that time. Because of mayors and governors' active participation in last year's Local Climate Action Summit, at the 28th UNFCCC Conference of the Parties meeting in Dubai, or COP28, over 70 national governments have recognized their importance and agreed to enhance collaboration through the new Coalition for High Ambition Multilevel Partnerships, or CHAMP. Bloomberg is a real proud partner and co-funder in Scale, and that has been a key effort in delivering the multi-level partnership and collaboration between cities, states, and country governments. It's hard to believe that we're now approaching the 1-year anniversary of implementing Scale's first major initiative focused on cutting emissions of methane from the waste sector. I know we'll hear more about this effort later in the day, and what I want to elevate now is that this initiative is driving real impact that we see every day on the ground in cities. In Lagos, Scale has been working directly with the Nigerian national government and the city team in Lagos, setting ambitious methane targets and identifying the lighthouse interventions and portfolio of actions supported by satellite methane data and world-class modeling to enable the most impactful and deliverable actions. Working together, city by city, country by country, we can make real progress. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ani Daskata. I'm the CEO and President of WRI, and we are a very proud implementing partner of Scale. And you will hear the rest of the morning from many, many leaders who are actually doing things to make this initiative work across the world to create really momentum in global action. I just wanted to take a moment to set the scientific context of why Scale is so important. This is the 10th, actually next year will be the 10th years of Paris Agreement, 10th year. And last year, there was a first assessment how well we are doing as the world on called Global Stocktake. A lot of you have seen it. One thing that was very clear from that all of you knew they would say that we're not doing very well at all, actually. We've done 7% of what we need to do. We need transformational change to actually accelerate. So I want to talk about a few numbers here. So the Paris Agreement, actually, if you add all the countries up, their ambition up, it adds up to about 2.8 centigrade, not 1.5 centigrade. But if you add all the ambition of cities, all the ambition of companies, we can get to somewhere about 1.8, 1.9 centigrade. Not 1.5 centigrade, but much better than 2.8 centigrade. So this is not about more ambition. We actually need more ambition. We're going to talk rest of the week. We've been talking about more ambition. I want to talk about that we are not doing what we have already committed to. We are not actually doing to what all countries. There's a big implementation gap, big gap between our promises that we have agreed in COP, what we are doing. What we need to do is to fix that implementation gap. This is where this initiative comes in. Because most action in the world takes place locally, in cities, in subnational governments. And the whole point of Scale was to figure out how actually we can work together with cities and subnational government to create more ambition, but also close the implementation gap. The science, this is what I'm going to point out, is actually very clear. We were part of many other organizations to publish it. Cities can decarbonize 90% of emissions. Cities produce about 75, 80% of emission of the world today. Somewhere less, somewhere more, but in that range. They can reduce 90% of emission with existing technologies. We don't need new technologies to do so. And if they did that, if all cities decarbonized by 2050, there $24 trillion of savings and gains in material and excess. I just wanted to remember these two numbers, that this is possible, the technology that exists. The gain of doing this is actually supremely significant. $24 trillion is about a quarter of the global GDP right now. Now, cities can't do this themselves. You know, cities, one of the big part of cities' emission is connected to energy use. Most cities don't produce energy. So cities have to work with national government. National government have to work with cities to actually make this happen. This is why we needed an initiative like Scale, and I was there 2 years back in Sharm el-Sheikh when it was launched, to create a momentum between how do you accelerate this relationship, this symbiotic relationship that is not just good to have. We will not get to 1.2 degree without it, and that's why the Scale has two initiatives. One is the Scale Forum and the Scale Accelerator. I just want to say a word about the accelerator. The first accelerator was about methane reduction, about 1 million metric ton of methane across waste, because a lot of methane comes from waste. Cities control most of the waste disposal side. What could be done? We are about to launch the next accelerator on buildings. As you know, buildings actually use 40% of energy. Actually, when you sit in New York City, you can realize the weight of that. It also produces 1/3 of emissions in cities. So getting buildings sorted out, reducing buildings emission is a huge win. But buildings is also very difficult because it's disaggregated, because they're individual building owners, and many of them, unlike, say, power plants. So it has an execution problem. This is why we need to work together, but also to get funding. Actually, New York City, under Antha was just here, under Mayor Bloomberg, had this phenomenal initiative, 1 million buildings, I think 1 million plus buildings. They work with to change how they actually heated and cooled. So buildings actually is a great frontier to get done. And countries like India, I don't know how many, I hope a lot of you, actually, I'm from India, so I hope all of you have been to India. The buildings that exist in India today, the same number of buildings will be built in the next 25 years. So if you can get those to be more efficient, we have a huge win coming. That's why a building accelerator will be launched. It has a very strange acronym, Zero Emission Resilient Building Accelerator, not ZEBRA, but ZERB. So that is what will be launched, and I hope all of you will join us in actually making that successful. And I want to thank you for being here in the discussions today, and you're going to hear from all kinds of leaders, all the great actions they're taking. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thanks very much to all of our opening speakers. And maybe by the end of today, we'll make ZERB a thing, right? We'll all be talking about ZERB being the new word. But it's really great to see the launch of this Buildings Accelerator, the Zero Emission and Resilient Buildings Accelerator. And yeah, big thanks to all of our speakers there for setting out the real importance of the Scale program, the action and impact that it's already leading to on the ground, and also the potential that we have to really leverage partnerships through this initiative. So we're now really pleased to welcome to the stage a short panel discussion with several subnational leaders to have a discussion about how we can even supercharge this work even further. So I'm going to turn it over to Champa Patel of the Climate Group as our moderator for this session. And I'm also going to introduce for the speakers Alan Winde, the Premier of the Western Cape of South Africa, Ana Luisa Ferreira, Secretary for Environment of Pernambuco in Brazil, and the Mayor of Turku, Minna Arve of Finland.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and to be chairing this session, putting a spotlight on multi-level action. So much has already been said about the importance of subnational leaders, so I'm not going to repeat any of that again. But what does that actually concretely mean in practice? And I'm delighted to be joined by our governors, the Secretary, and our lovely colleague, the Mayor, to talk through what this actually means. So if I could turn to you, Premier Winde. You're a Premier of the Western Cape, a province in South Africa. What are the primary challenges that you're facing in your jurisdiction in decarbonising the building sector? And how are you addressing these challenges? We know it's one of the sectors that has the highest emissions, but it's a difficult area to tackle. What have you been doing in the Western Cape?
Good day, everybody. Thank you very much, and thanks for that question. I mean, we are feeling climate change every single day in our region, in Africa, from snow in KwaZulu-Natal at the moment, which is a tropical region, to us in the Western Cape, having in the last 7 months 6 various climate change disasters declared. So we're in the midst of it, but it has been so for years. So I think, first of all, before I get to buildings and the construction space, we've had these massive impacts on us. And we have a saying now, don't waste a crisis. So if I go back to 2017, we had, and you would have known this, but Cape Town was going to run out of water. We had days countdown to day 0. And that forced us to really not waste the crisis. So we retrofitted buildings from energy to water. We put low flow systems, made sure that the ISO measurements became a standard across our buildings, government buildings as well as private sector buildings. And so between water and energy, we really pushed the boundaries. And we produce in government now a resilience report of our buildings in government. And I think that shows that government is leading the way. In actual fact, we have better resilience measurements in our government buildings now than the private sector do. And of course, they're trying to catch up, which is really good. You see their green building, the green building ratings, star ratings. But we started with training our own staff, making sure that with the Green Building Council, that we were having people within the infrastructure department getting the right training, making sure that the systems were in place to put the measurements there, so we produced the report. And then, of course, it's linkages, and it really is, it's about a provincial government or regional governments and their linkages to the municipalities, and in our case, the biggest municipality, which is the city of Cape Town. The mayor and I have a Monday morning meeting, every single Monday morning. And I don't say we always speak about climate change, but it's pretty much an agenda item. At the moment now, you're seeing how we're having to, in water and energy, in the water space, we're going to have to reuse water. I spoke about day 0. Right now, we've had more rain in July than we've ever had in Cape Town since we've measured rainfall. So the exact opposite. And we know that within a few short years, it could be back again. So Cape Town is now busy with the biggest reuse water system investment over the next 3 years in reuse of water on the African continent. Just because we have to be alive to what's happening. I mean, we're retrofitting everything that we can, and then energy as well. It's not normally something that a province is involved in, but we've set ourselves ambitious targets. We use 4,000 megawatts at peak at the moment across the province. We've got 5,700 megawatts of renewable power by 2035, and we're well on our way. We put in 750 megawatts last year, 2,000 in the pipeline, and we're going to be way ahead of target there as well. But you've got to measure, because if you can't measure, you can't manage, and you've got to put out those reports. You've got to challenge. Government has got to lead where possible, because if you get that right, then the private sector really push behind you.
No, it's an important point. Turning now to Secretary Ferreira from Pernambuco, a beautiful state in Brazil. You know, when we pursue energy efficiency measures or building decarbonization measures, it's not just for to reduce climate emissions, it's also to ensure that people have healthier lives. So what's the work that you're doing? Because you're doing some interesting work in Pernambuco to think through how you bring together the climate and social justice agendas.
Thank you, Champa. First, thank you so much for inviting the state of Pernambuco, Brazil, here to the stage. First, before I get to buildings, also, I would like to highlight that I come from Brazil, a country that is naturally thought of when we think about transitioning to a new economy, about nature-based solutions and energy transition. But everyone, when think about Brazil and climate change, think of the Amazon. I come from northeast Brazil. The Amazon is on the other side. And then when we think about southeast Brazil is where São Paulo, Brasília, Rio de Janeiro. I come from the region of Brazil that represents, it comprises 28% of the population, but only 14% of the Brazilian GDP. So the most poor and unequal region in the country. This is very important when we think about mitigation because it gives us a different perspective. I think the world has wasted too much time and resources focusing on mitigation only. Lately, we've seen a shift to the nature-based, to the need for biodiversity, but now we need to finally make the last link. We need to be sure and be positive that unless we regulate and we cap social and economic inequalities globally, regionally, and within countries and states, we will not be under two. So this is a very strong message that Pernambuco and that Brazil is bringing to the COP29, COP30, and now going back to buildings, we are doing our part as well. So we have procured in Pernambuco a public-private partnership where we assure that 100% of the biggest buildings in Pernambuco, the public official buildings, they are now sourced by solar power. So we also, since we're coming from a state and a country that do not have enough resources, enough public savings to do all of the investments themselves, we are actually putting a lot of our efforts into bringing the private sector together with us. This is very important. We have launched the last July our action plan for moving to a new regenerative economy. Our strategy centers on attracting to Pernambuco the investments that are really regenerative. Being from a poor country where 50% of our people lives below poverty line and 20% of our people live below extreme poverty line, makes us very vulnerable to accepting any kind of development, be it gray or green. So our strategy now is centered on attracting and selecting the investments that we want to be in Pernambuco, and these are regenerative investments. Thank you.
And turning now to Mayor Arvo, it's interesting, we were speaking earlier and the connection between Finland and Pernambuco in terms of the collaboration. So just on that point, how can subnational governments, whether that's states, regions, or cities, leverage their unique position, you know, on the front lines of climate impacts, but also often the first responders to any climate disaster? How do they leverage their position to accelerate climate action?
Hi, everyone. I always tend to say that the leadership matters, and also in this sense that everything what cities do, it has a local, it has a national, and it has a global impact. Yep. And this brings to that all these levels have to collaborate closely, not only together with the city networks, but also in a multi-level governance. And give you just a couple of examples. My city is a historical city, nearly 800 years old city, and we are transforming it to be a modern, sustainable city. And when I took the office, we set the goal to be carbon neutral by 2029, which is the year when we are having our 800 years anniversary. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we are going to do. But then coming to the next levels, so we are working, like you heard the German minister talk about the EU missions, 100 mission cities with the goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. We are one of those cities, and that gives us also a lot of support from the European Commission, from our national government to do this together. And when coming to the global level, I'm also vice president for ICLEI, which is Local Governments for Sustainability. We have a strong collaboration between different countries, different continents. We have more than 2,500 members all around the globe, from Global South to Global North, and that's where we share our experiences. We get the knowledge, we can build the capacity together as a network. And also, really, that coming back to the leadership and why leadership matters is that you get the inspiration from the leaders that are doing the work. For instance, for me, the greatest inspiration has been the Mike Bloomberg, who's been mentioned here already, the work that he has done here in New York, but not only here, but what he is doing still today. And one of the initiatives that was already mentioned here is the JAMP initiative, which was launched in COP29 in Dubai. And I was working since then with Finnish government to make Finland join as well to the JAMP initiative, and now we are launching this week here in New York that Finland has joined this initiative and got so much support from the Bloomberg Philanthropies and ICLEI, so the city networks. So all these are so combined, and it's so important that we work together.
Thank you. And I think that vertical integration, which is exactly what CHAMP is trying to achieve, how do you bring different levels of government to work together is so critical. But one of the themes that you've talked about is that by itself is not sufficient. We do need to work with the private sector as well. And I'm curious to hear in the final minutes that we have, what strategies have you used to leverage private sector investment? Are there any innovative fiscal instruments or tools that you've developed that's helped crowd in the investment that's needed in order to ensure we can proceed at the pace needed? If I may turn to you, Premier Winde.
I mean, your financial institutions need to be on board with your plan, because that enables the investment. And of course, your big property developers, the same thing. They need to know that they're doing the responsible thing. But it's not only about government and private sector, it's also about citizens. It's about people. Because people live in cities, people are a part of this ecosystem. And I referred earlier to Day Zero, and it's about getting everybody on board behind the same plan. We were using 1.3 billion liters of water a day in the city of Cape Town in 2017. Now in 2024, we are not even near that usage. We're sitting at about 800 million liters, and our population grows by 150,000 people a year. But we got behavior change right. It was also about changing the water flow systems and the reticulation systems, but it was people. And we went from 250 liters per person per day down to 50 liters per person per day in that crisis. But people have kept that behavior change. They haven't gone back to abusing our water. We've got an energy crisis, and we're seeing exactly the same thing. Citizens are behaving differently, and it's got to be a mixture between private sector and public sector, creating that ecosystem, setting the measurements in place, but then it's about bringing your people along with you.
Absolutely. And Secretary Ferreira, I mean, very much what you were saying about what you're doing in Pernambuco chimes with what the Premier is saying. What are your thoughts on what tools have you used to crowd in private sector investment?
Yes, so Pernambuco has just been selected as the first territory in the world to receive the FJ-GAT. It's the Finance for Just and Green Energy Transition, championed by CAF, a financial institution, and UNF. UNCD and UNDP. So this is for us a very innovative approach and initiative. We know that pure private sector attraction is key for our country, but we also need innovative approaches. So bringing in philanthropic money and with pure commercial money, this is going to be where we can find the innovations in finance, because no one knows still exactly what needs to be done. What we have done so far is not enough. It's not working to the level of ambition that we need to get. So in order to get there, we need innovation. And innovation combines with patient, philanthropic money filled with commercial money. So this combination, I think, is where we need to get.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you noted the importance of philanthropy and the non-profit sector in helping to advance these goals, because they're also a critical stakeholder. Amir, if I come to you, what do you see, what role do you see for philanthropy or the not-for-profit sector in helping to advance climate goals?
Yeah, I think it's very, very important in many ways, and I mentioned already that we are working with the city networks. And that's where you build the capacity, you share the experiences, you learn from each other, and you can give your examples and give the inspiration what's been done. And for instance, with Bloomberg Philanthropies, we are working with the Youth Climate Fund, which is a concrete project for the youth projects that they can really do something by themselves. And it's not, we are not organizing it, we are not telling them what to do. They tell us what they want to do, and they get this kind of funding for their projects, and I think it's also very, very important, very very concrete things. But also the businesses and the private sector. I mentioned about the EU 100 mission cities, and we have made a climate contract with the European Commission to do that and how we are getting there. But what we did locally more than 40 climate contracts with our businesses in our area, how they will do their part to be part of the climate ambition that we're having in my city. And for instance, my city is the shipbuilder city. We make the biggest cruisers in the world. All they are sailing here in the Caribbean Sea. And the shipyard that we have there, they also share the ambition. They are building the concept for the carbon neutral cruiser at the moment, and they are one of our main partners in our climate contract. So there is a lot of things that we have to do together, because we know that in the city, as an organization, we can cut half of the emissions, but the rest of the half, we need our residents and we need our businesses to work with us.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time, but even in such a short conversation with you all, we are already starting to hear and learn about the ambition and innovation shown at state, regional, and city level. There's so much that's happening that can be capitalized on, such a good foundation to build on. So thank you so much for sharing what you're doing, and look forward to continuing the discussions. If you could join me in thanking our speakers.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to hand over to the next session. There will be our closing session. So please welcome Yutaka Matsuzawa, Japan's Vice Minister for Global Affairs.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you very much, the United States government and Germany to make this event well organized and successful. And I pay my full respect to the subnational leaders gathered here today for their enthusiasm in climate actions. Cities play a crucial role as drivers of global transformation to net zero, climate resilient, and nature positive development, as emphasized in the IPCC's sixth assessment report. Strengthening the capacity of subnational government to act on the ground is an important component of scaling up global efforts to address the triple crisis and benefit sustainable transformation. In order to strengthen multi-level subnational government collaboration, last year, Japan hosted a remote event, the G7 Roundtable on Subnational Climate Actions. Policymakers of the US government and other G7 members attended this roundtable and enthusiastically discussed policies and programs promoting subnational climate actions. At the roundtable, G7 and U7 participants identified key points. National support policies and programs for subnational climate actions, such as scale, are needed. Meanwhile, mainstreaming climate actions in urban development and management is required. Eventually, subnational climate actions can leverage synergies. The output of this roundtable were compiled into a summary report and were introduced at COP28. Today, it strikes me that your scale has two priority areas. Number one, sustainable buildings, and number two, methane emission reductions from the waste sector. While listening to the speeches of the distinguished guests today, I'm convinced that measures in these two areas could be lucky low-hanging fruits in our subnational climate actions. And these actions can be expanded globally through collaboration and cooperation with national and subnational partners and international organizations and private sectors. Fortunately, in both of these prioritized areas, there are successful, relevant activities by subnational government and stakeholders in Japan. The government of Japan, together with subnational government, will be very happy to share with the international community the lessons we have learned. Currently, the government of Japan implements city-to-city collaboration program to cooperate with developing partners for promoting the subnational climate actions. Thank you very much.
So thank you to the Vice Minister there for the closing remarks. And it's just down to me now to really close out our wonderful session this morning. We've really had exceptional discussions on the critical role that subnational governments have and must continue to play in order to really achieve the global fight against the climate crisis. So I certainly feel inspired by all of this action. I hope that all of you do too. And I want to say a special thank you to our speakers from Germany, Japan, South Africa, Finland, and Brazil, as well as to the US State Department, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and all of our scale partners for joining us here today and making this session happen. I really hope that the lessons and successes that you've heard today will help inspire all of you in your organizations, in your roles, to go back and continue advancing bold, on-the-ground solutions and ambitious action. For those of you who are attending some of the roundtables on scale later on this morning, that will be starting very soon. We'll be heading up to the 4th floor in a couple of minutes, and we'll be going into a deeper dive discussion for those of you that have registered on the work on the Buildings Accelerator, as well as followed by that, the work on reducing methane emissions. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your support, and enjoy the rest of your day.